This morning. Happy Monday, everyone. It's good to see all of you.
Yeah, we love to see it. We have a special guest lined up for you guys today. Amy Summers is speaking with us this morning. She is the author of an amazing book called Lift, 10 Mentorship Touchpoints to Empower Your Team and Accelerate Your Career. So we're going to welcome her on to the show here this morning. Good morning, Amy. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I kind of want to go back before we get into talking about your book and mentorship and leadership skills. But you first founded Pitch Publicity in 2003. And I watched kind of the highlight reel that you had of your internship program. And you said this is not your typical internship. It's internship and mentorship in one. Can you talk about why that is important and how you got started in all of this?
Absolutely. Well, I always tell people that I was an accidental entrepreneur, but I'm also an accidental mentor. So I started my own company at age 27, not because I wanted to, but I got fired from my other agency job, and I was really looking for somewhere to work. And I had a bunch of clients that said, just buy a phone, buy a computer, keep working for us. So I did. And here I am 23 years later running my own company. But along the way, you have to hire people to work for you. And it's not something that a lot of people think about when they build a business. So that's what my book Lift is really about, is the behind the scenes of building a company and the importance of investing in people so that you can also be a success at what you do.
What are, if you can name off maybe 1, 2, 3 things that are most important? You mentioned people, they're so important. They're an important part of building that business. What are some of the other things that we should really strive to do if we're building a business?
Well, as I mentioned, people are the number one thing, and we don't think about that. We often think about our product or our service or whatever we're launching as entrepreneurs. But if you aren't able to transfer your mission and your vision to the people that are working for you, then you really don't have a company. You just have an idea. And so I think that that's the hardest thing for entrepreneurs to do. Obviously, you have to have a good service. You have to have a good product. All those things are important. But I've worked with many companies that had all of those things, but they just couldn't get their team on board, and they had a lot of turnover, and that stuff will really put back a company if they don't have the right team. So I would say that is the number one thing. It's more important than your service, your product.
Mm-hmm. And I love that. So you put the focus on the people, on your team, building them up, because the more confident they feel, the better they're going to execute whatever their role is. And you had talked about how you dreamt of climbing the corporate ladder. And then when you got there, you realized, you said you want to knock it down. Why? What issue were you seeing, and what did you hope to change from that?
Well, I just had a lot of dissatisfaction climbing the traditional corporate ladder. The more I climbed, the less happy I was with myself. And I was noticing people around me were the same way. So when I started my own company, I wanted to really turn that around. And if I could build others up, maybe their dreams were not my dreams. Maybe they were working for me now, but they wanted to do something else in the future. I asked them what they wanted to do, and I helped those dreams become possible for them. And many people that have worked for me have gone on and done other things, but that's kind of been our deal. And so I think a mistake that a lot of business owners make is they think that when people come to work for them, that is also their, goal and desire. And it isn't always what it is. Sometimes they're just there to get some skills and build their own career, and you can help them along on their journey. And in exchange, they'll help you.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it, too, is that you mentioned kind of the area when it comes to, training. When you're training people and building them up within the company, and if they're in turn successful, then you don't have to deal then with retraining a new batch of employees within your business. And I think you touched on something, too, is that the culture within a workplace really matters. And I think you keep good people when you have a great culture in the workplace.
Yes, that's true. But I also address in my book that we shouldn't rely on keeping people. So we shouldn't hold on to talent. When someone's ready to, move on to a different part of their career, maybe it's a different department, or maybe it's just another company entirely, we should feel confident in ourselves that we were able to develop talent and that we can develop talent again. And so we shouldn't hold on to people. We shouldn't trap them in their office. We should let them go when it's time for them to go, when it's their turn, and be confident in ourselves that we know how to develop talent. And so that's one of the things I really stress and lift for leaders. And I have a whole touch point on that called elevate and release, to not be afraid of that part of the career journey.
Well, and I think you touched on that. That's what I meant to rephrase. You keep people in a way where you're developing them within the company, where they get promoted within your company. And then eventually maybe they launch their own company and you become in turn their mentor as a result of all your hard work that you've kind of invested in them.
And it's a win for you, right? Because if somebody worked for you and then they go on and they succeed and they even do better than you, it's such a compliment back to you. So that's why I try to reframe it in the book, that other people's successes are just a reflection of you if you were helping them in that process and that part of their journey.
That's so true.
Yeah. I think of it as being a parent, right? Like, you want your children to grow up and be great people and go off to do great things. It should be something you're proud of in your employees as well. You help get them to that next step in their phase of life. So that's a great way to look at it. And then you talk about confidence, how we're not born with it, but it's built. Describe what that means to you, and how do you build confidence?
Sure. So build confidence is touch point number 4 in my book, Lift. And I will say that it's probably the number one thing that I'm hearing right now that most young professionals say they need. They want to be more confident in what they're doing. And so really, where do we get confidence? We're not going to get it just from being book smart. We have to be a little street smart, right? So we have to get it from experiencing things, making mistakes, making our own mistakes, and learning from others. Using our voice more than hiding behind emails. So there's lots of ways to build confidence.
And let's talk about your book more specifically. I love the cover. It's this bright, beautiful blue, big, bold letters and butterflies on the cover as well. Can you walk us through, was there any, particular meaning either in the color you chose or in the butterflies at all when you were creating this book?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because as an author, you always fear what your book cover is going to look like. But I fought pretty hard for mine, and I actually did a lot of research behind it. So I interviewed all of my mentees that had worked for me over the past 2 decades about what really resonated with them, as I was really targeting this book to emerging leaders that were in the category of millennial or Gen Z. And they really liked the idea of wanting to have a self-help book or self-improvement book, but they didn't want people to know that they were reading a self-improvement book. So I think that when you look at Lift, it could be a beach read, or you could be improving yourself in your career. So I thought that was an interesting insight. And then the butterflies are representing a metamorphosis that you're going to have during your career journey. And I really wanted the butterflies to resonate with anyone. So, and then the colors are just to elevate and lift and make you feel elevated.
Yeah,
I think the whole idea with the cocoon and the butterfly is such a really good analogy to have, and that can happen in many stages of life, right? It can happen in your teen years, it can happen in your first job, it can happen as a parent, and when you're launching a company, you're transforming in those different areas of life.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I actually addressed that in the book. You both have brought it up a couple of times. Parenting is mentoring as well. I mean, it is the same thing that we're doing here at the job. And actually, the touch points, the 10 touch points, touch points was a term used by Dr. Brasington. Like in 1992, he wrote a book called Touch Points, but he was referring to touch points for your child as they were developing. And so I looked at that and I said, we also need touch points as we're developing into this phase of, going from child to young professional. Yeah. And so touch points are really reminders of things that we need to be doing to develop the human connection that we have with people. And we're so focused right now on technology and automation, but we're not really thinking about how do we develop those human skills that a lot of younger generations maybe are lacking.
It's interesting. I'm glad you brought up the whole AI portion, because last week we have this segment called Ask AI. And we asked AI what were some of the 5 top jobs that AI will not take over, or how can we train to kind of work with AI? And one of them was critical thinking, because it will not be able to take over that portion of humanity. Humanity still exists and it still rules. We just have to figure out how to manage AI and the rest of technology. I think you touched on a really important point.
It's so important. And I think that, obviously we all need to learn AI and how to use it. It's going to be critical in our jobs, but we also need to know how to massage it and how to add that human touch to it. We can't just use it by itself in a box. We have to have that human connection, even creatives. There's 28 comics in my book Lift, and I used an artist to create them originally. And I would have never gotten this creation from just going through AI, because it was some of his lived experience, Stephen Palladino, who was my artist. It was some of my lived experience. And so you get to follow the polar bear boss, the caterpillar mentee, who turns into a butterfly by the end of the book. And it's a beautiful story, but I think creatives are under pressure a lot. They think that their jobs are going to be taken over by AI, but it was that human element between Stephen and I that we were able to develop this comic series in the book that I just don't think you would have gotten from just a pure AI.
Yeah, and he's worked with some big companies. Even big superstars, including Beyonce. And I actually kind of like that aspect. You put a little bit of illustration in this book that's meant for adults, right? So we can enjoy that too as we're reading through your book. Amy, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time on Fox 10 Talks.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Here's